All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we are looking at how one speaker uses the Bible to inspire change in people's lives.
It's amazing how he uses stories and analogies to really get his points across about the Bible.
Yeah, he really tries to help people connect to these old ideas, but in a way that makes sense for today.
Right, and he starts off by comparing the Word of God to a seed.
Okay.
He calls it an incorruptible seed,
Hmm.
which is different from a normal seed that could die or not grow. And he actually uses the Greek word spora here, which is related to sperma.
Sperma. Wow, that's not a word you usually hear in a sermon. But I get what he's doing. He's taking something everyone knows, like a seed, to explain a big spiritual idea.
Yeah,
It's like he's saying changing your life spiritually can be as easy as a seed growing.
exactly. And he contrasts that with how many people try to change themselves, struggling and forcing it to happen.
So he's saying there's a better way. Instead of using all your willpower, you can use the power of the word. That's interesting. But does he have any examples of this working?
Oh, he definitely does. One story that stands out is about a young man from Chicago who goes to the Speaker's Bible College.
Charis Bible College, right?
That's the one. And this student, he wasn't really into it at first. Only went because his mom promised him a car and a place to live.
Sounds like a lot of college kids I knew.
Right. But the speaker doesn't just tell the story. He gives you a sense of where this guy came from. A tough part of Chicago with violence all around. The speaker even said someone warned him not to go to a certain McDonald's there because it was so dangerous.
Wow. So this kid comes from all this negativity, and suddenly he's spending months at Bible college, surrounded by the word. Then he goes home for Christmas, thinking he'll ditch the whole thing and go back to his old life. But something changes.
Yeah, the speaker uses this story to show how his point works in real life. The young man wasn't even trying to change, but being around the word changed him without him realizing it.
He couldn't fit back into his old life, like he'd grown beyond it. It makes you wonder, what is it about the Bible that has this kind of power? Is it the actual words, the stories, or the message itself?
It's something to think about for sure. And it's interesting how the speaker then shares his own stories, like he's saying, hey, this stuff really works. It changed my life too.
Oh, yeah. His stories are pretty wild, like that one where he almost died in a gas chamber during training for Vietnam.
Oh, right. And he was terrified of having to go through it again.
Totally understandable.
And he tells about praying to be spared from the gas chamber. And on a whim, he volunteers for a totally different job.
It's like he was tempting fate.
I know, right? But it turns out that job was the answer to his prayer.
He got to be the barracks guard while everyone else suffered in the gas chamber. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. And it was during this time, while reading Mark 4 about the tiny mustard seed growing into a huge tree, that he has this big realization.
Remember that seed analogy we talked about earlier? It all comes back here. He reads about the seed becoming this huge tree and starts praying for that same growth and influence in his own life. He wants to be a huge tree making a difference, he said.
And then God speaks to him
Yeah,
and tells him, Andrew, focus on the root, the word. The growth will take care of itself.
it's a good reminder that real growth, the kind that lasts, often starts on the inside. It reminds us to be patient. This speaker is all about the long game. Nurture the word inside you, and the results will come eventually.
Which brings us to his story about his money problems. Now, this part gets really interesting. He says he's always been generous, even as a kid, but he was in debt. So what does he do? He writes down a bunch of Bible verses about prosperity and just thinks about them all the time for 2 whole years.
2 years. Talk about dedication. He's really hammering in this idea that you won't always see results right away. You have to be patient, plant the seed, and give it time to grow.
And then, bam. He says everything changed in 1996. His finances suddenly started getting better, and he credits it all to planting those prosperity seeds from the Bible. This idea of waiting for things to work out, it really connects with that bamboo analogy he uses later.
You plant the bamboo, and for 4 years, you only see one little leaf. It's easy to get discouraged and think you did something wrong.
Especially now, when we want everything to happen instantly.
Right. But then in year 5, that bamboo shoots up 18 feet.
Wow.
What's cool is how he connects that natural event to spiritual things. He's basically saying spiritual growth works the same way. Sometimes the biggest changes are happening under the surface where we can't see them.
That's a really good point. And I think this is the perfect place to transition to the next part of his message, where he talks about the ground itself, the heart.
Let's hold that thought for part 2 of our deep dive.
Right.
Okay, so we were talking about the bamboo, right? But he doesn't stop there. He goes deeper and starts talking about the ground itself.
Mm.
Not like actual dirt, but more like the heart. He says the seed, the word, doesn't create something totally new. It activates what's already inside us.
That's interesting. So it's not like we're blank slates. We're born with this potential just waiting to be, I don't know, like awakened.
Exactly. He even uses that verse from Genesis, Genesis 1:11.
Oh, yeah, where God tells the earth to bring forth plants and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And he really focuses on that phrase, the earth brought forth. It's like the power to grow is already in the earth itself.
So he's connecting that to us, to our own ability to grow spiritually. I'm starting to see where he's going with this. But then he takes this whole thing in a kind of surprising direction. He starts talking about how this power inside the earth goes against, like, what a lot of people think about the earth these days.
Oh, yeah, he's not a fan of that whole the earth is fragile, we need to protect it thing. He thinks God knew what we humans would do and made the earth tough enough to handle it.
He even talks about all those fossil fuels in North Dakota. Like, we've got plenty of resources if we just use them right. It's definitely a different perspective.
Yeah, and it all comes back to that idea of abundance. Just like the earth has everything it needs to keep going, so do we. We have what it takes to be spiritually fulfilled. But it's a matter of changing how we think.
Instead of focusing on what we don't have, we should look for what's already there, like those seeds of potential.
Exactly. It's like a journey of self-discovery, but with the Bible as our guide. He even tells this incredible story about ancient Egyptian tombs.
Really?
Yeah, they found these seeds that were like thousands of years old, and when they planted them, they sprouted.
Wow, that's amazing. It really makes you think about the words, like that seed. Even if we don't see results yet, that potential is still there inside us.
Right. So he compares our hearts to the earth. It's fertile ground. It can bring forth fruit when we plant the word there. He talks about really absorbing the word, meditating on it, letting it take root.
So just hearing it isn't enough. We have to, like, really work with it, make sure it has the right conditions to grow. I can see how that would be tough with all the distractions we have today.
Oh, he knows that.
Yeah.
He warns against just being passive about it. He even gives this kind of blunt example, comparing praying for a child without taking any action to trying to get pregnant just by standing next to a man.
Mm.
It's funny, but it makes the point. We can't just sit around and expect God to do everything. We have to take part in our own growth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where faith comes in, right?
Yeah, okay.
He talks about mixing the word with faith. He even quotes Hebrews 4:2, which says the word is only helpful if we believe it. So it's not about just understanding the Bible with your head. It's about trusting it in your heart, believing it can change us.
It's about taking that leap of faith. But then he says spiritual growth can happen even when we don't realize it. He brings up Mark 4:27, where Jesus talks about a farmer planting a seed and it just sprouts and grows. He knoweth not how.
Right. It's about surrender. We don't have to figure everything out. We just need to trust the process. Trust that the word is working inside us, even when we can't see it.
This is really reassuring, especially when you're struggling and wondering if anything's changing. It's like he's saying, hang in there. Even if you don't see a sprout yet, it's growing.
Right. But he also throws in a bit of reality. He says spiritual growth isn't always sunshine and roses. He talks about opposition, something working against the word taking root in us.
He's talking about Satan, isn't he?
Yeah. He actually uses that word, Satan, and he connects it to spiritual warfare. This is where things get a bit intense.
Okay.
He goes to Mark 4:15, where it talks about Satan trying to snatch away the seed we've planted. And he says this stealing can look like all sorts of things. Doubts, discouragement, bad influences, even just being too busy.
So there's this constant battle for our attention, for our hearts, and we need to be aware of that.
Exactly. He even shares a personal story about being persecuted for keeping his Bible college open during the pandemic. He was sued by the governor of Colorado. He could have gone to jail and lost the college's tax-exempt status.
Wow, that's intense. It makes you wonder, how do you stay strong in your beliefs when you're facing that kind of pressure?
And this is where he really emphasizes personal responsibility. He says, Satan is terrified of the word of God. He can't go against God, but he'll go against you. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? We have to protect those seeds that have been planted in us.
So it's more than just listening to the word. It's about protecting it, nurturing it, helping it grow even when things are tough.
Yeah. He ends this section by saying Satan can't actually stop God's plan, but he can trick us into stopping our own growth.
It's subtle, but it's important. We have a choice in how we react to those challenges. We're not just helpless victims. We have a part to play in our spiritual journey.
Exactly. And that takes us to his final points about the nature of spiritual growth and what it means to live a supernatural life.
Okay, so we've talked about planting those seeds, taking care of our hearts, and even dealing with some spiritual pushback. What I'm wondering now is like, where does all this lead?
Yeah.
What does he say about the goal, the fruit of all this spiritual growth?
Well, it's funny, he doesn't really give a specific destination, like a point where you've made it.
Mhm.
He's more about the journey, the transformation that happens gradually over time. He even says wanting everything instantly can actually hold us back from real growth. He uses that analogy of a seed growing, first the sprout, then the stalk, then the full ear of corn.
Right, right. It's like how we're always in a hurry these days. We want to see results right now, but real growth, whether it's a plant or a person, it takes time.
Exactly. He seems to be talking to those people who think if you just pray hard enough or believe strong enough, you'll instantly be perfect and have no problems.
Hmm.
Instead, he's encouraging us to enjoy the journey, the good and the bad, knowing that transformation is a process, not a finish line.
It's about the journey, not the destination. I like that.
Yeah. And he says that really diving deep into the Word, like spending those 2 years studying at his Bible college, can speed up that growth.
Makes sense.
He compares that to just waiting around for things to change. He suggests that if we don't make an effort, we'll probably stay stuck in the same old ruts.
Right.
But he's not just talking about understanding the Bible with your head. He wants us to let the Word really sink into our hearts, into our thinking, and change how we live.
So it's about taking action, but also being patient.
Yeah, that seems to be the recurring message here. And he ends with this powerful statement. If your life isn't supernatural, it's superficial.
Wow, that really makes you think. What does it even mean to have a supernatural life?
He doesn't go into a lot of detail, but I think he's challenging us to look at how deep our faith really is and how it shows up in our everyday lives. It's like he's saying true faith should affect everything, not just how we feel inside, but how we act, how we treat people, how we interact with the world around us.
So it's not just about feeling good or being positive. It's about letting our faith touch everything we do to the point where it becomes something amazing, something different.
I think that's a great way to put it. And he leaves us with a really good question. If you had to choose one seed from the Bible to focus on right now, which one would it be and why?
It's a perfect way to wrap up. It makes this whole message personal, helps us apply these ideas to our own lives. So what seed will you choose to plant today? Keep searching, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep growing.